From Melbourne, Australia, the Herb Kirsten Evangelistic Alliance presents Global Financial Crisis. Did the Bible predict it? So sit back, grab a friend, and enjoy a fact-filled presentation that has thrilled audiences everywhere.
Okay, what is this? Have a look. A set of pens that you put in your handbag, beautifully burnished aluminium. What is it? What does it look like to you? You are looking at the future. This is the new computer that engineers in Japan are working on, that you carry in your handbag or in your shirt pocket, and you assemble it anywhere in the world and it will work as a computer. The keyboard is a light pattern and it is sensitive to your fingertips. It throws a projection on a flat surface. You can go anywhere in the world with this and take your computer with you, and it makes a laptop look like a dinosaur. Okay, we'll talk about that in a moment. Remember these two gentlemen, Senator McCain and Senator Obama, debating late last year for the White House, remember? And talking about Iran and Iraq and national security and healthcare. And you can see why the other guy became president. Not a good look, John. And I knew at that moment that Barack Obama had the game sewn up when I saw that picture. But here they are debating, and while they're debating about getting into the White House, the houses of Americans were being repossessed and imploding under the weight of the global financial crisis. And this gives you a rough idea of the rate of foreclosures in 18 months. In the first quarter of 2007, 250,000 homes were repossessed. By the second quarter of 2008, 750,000 homes were repossessed in 3 months. I'm talking 3 monthly figures here, quarterly figures. That's about 8,330 homes every day being foreclosed and being repossessed by the banks. That's a shocking statistic. And while the small people were falling over, the giants of Wall Street were feeling the heat. This company, Bear Stearns, was founded in 1923. And it floundered in 2008. This company, Lehman Brothers, was founded in 1850 and floundered in 2008. This company had survived the Great Depression, but it could not survive the global financial crisis. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae stands for Federal National Mortgage Association. It was set up by President Roosevelt in 1939 to allow low-income earners to get into the housing market. It was privatised in 1969, and by 2008 they were in deep financial trouble. Freddie Mac, Federal Home Loans Corporation, deals in the secondary mortgage market, in trouble by 2008. AIG, American Insurance Group, the world's largest insurance company, the most admired, one of the most admired companies in the world, 1,660 employees, 130 different countries that it operated in, a $1 trillion balance sheet, collapsed under the strain of the global financial crisis, and the American government had to buy in and bought 80% of the stock to retain ownership, so they had control. If they hadn't have done that, they would have gone bankrupt, definitely. Chrysler Corporation. I'm driving a Jeep, and a week after I bought the Jeep, Chrysler went into Chapter 11. I knew that was going to happen, and I knew that Fiat was negotiating to buy into Chrysler. It didn't really bother me that they were in financial trouble, because I knew that another automaker would buy them. Chrysler building in New York City, an icon. Chrysler executives sitting there nervous, more nervous than I am tonight, biting their fingernails. Chapter 11 bankruptcy. General Motors. Who would have thought the world's largest selling automotive company, consistently for 20 years, the largest, the top seller, Chapter 11, bankruptcy. Alan Greenspan, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, said in October last year to Congress, "I have no explanation or answers for the global financial crisis." A financial guru, Alan Greenspan, and he said, "I don't know what caused it, and I don't know how to explain it." Well, we know what caused it, and we're going to look at that very quickly tonight and share it with you, and then see if the Bible has anything to say about this. This little boy would love for GFC to go away. No GFC in this house. I wish we could all think like that and make it go away, but folks, I have good news and I have bad news. The bad news is it's not going to go away, and we'll explore that in a moment. Do you know how much $1 billion is? Try and visualise $1 billion. It's 1,000 times $1 million. You've got $1 million here in a pile. You've got 1,000 piles. You've got $1 billion. And that's what it looks like. There are 9 zeros. And if you were to count from 1 to 1 billion out loud, it would take you 95 years. So have you got that figure in your head? And if you're 48 years old, you were born 1 billion seconds ago. I was born a little more than that ago, but not much. Now what about $1 trillion? Multiply the billion that I've just given you by 1,000. And it looks like this. 12 zeros. Have you got that? Start counting from 1 to 1 trillion. Out loud. By the time you finish, you'll be 190,259 years more old than you are now. That's 1 trillion. Why do I share these numbers with you? Because the amount of money or value lost on the share market since this crisis began was a whopping 33 trillion. That's incomprehensible. My brain can't take that in. I can take $1 million in, but past that I start to have trouble. 33 trillion. And that figure is more than the gross domestic product of some of the most powerful nations in the world. The United States, Canada, Japan, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Italy. Their gross domestic product is less than the amount of money lost on the share market in the last 18 months. There goes your superannuation. National debt of America. Have a guess. Have a guess. I've given you some idea of $1 trillion. Sorry? Did I hear a figure? 3. Try $11.5 trillion. $11.5 trillion, and the gross domestic product of America is 14 trillion. So the debt is almost the same as what the entire United States produces in goods and services for 1 year. If they worked flat out for 1 year and nobody got paid a cracker, they would just pay off their debt. And I don't think that's likely. This gives you an idea of the amount of American debt, because people say to me, Herb, that figure of 11.5 trillion, yeah, it's a lot of money, but America's a huge country and everything's relative. Yeah? It's a lot to us, may not be a lot to the United States. Have a look at the chart. The national debt of America went up in 1945 at the end of the Second World War because of the amount of money that the war cost. These figures are in 2008 dollars. So the Second World War put America into debt from here to there. $3 trillion in today's terms. And then after the war ended, it settled down during the 50s to around $2 trillion, right through until President Reagan took office. And under Reaganomics, the debt shot up to around $6 trillion. And then it was corrected. But then George W. Bush came on the scene. And I don't know whether he's to blame, or whether the terrorist problems are to blame, or national security, or the natural disasters, or foreign aid, or fat cats in Wall Street, but look what happened under George Bush. That's before, that's after. It went up to $10 trillion and beyond. It's currently running at 11.2. And it goes up every day. Have a guess. How much? Every day the debt goes up by 3.86 billion every day. What chance have they got to pay off the debt? The number of unemployed people in America, have a guess. 14.5 million. What's the unemployment rate? 9.5%. What is it in Australia? 5.8%. We think it's bad here. It's 9.5 over there. And that's the official rate. The unofficial rate is probably higher. Now, the experts are saying by the end of the year, the unemployment rate in America will be close to 12%. Here's the graph. Unemployment shot up dramatically in January last year, almost straight up, from 5% to just under 10%. It doubled in 18 months. And every month, the number of unemployed Americans who join the queue is a whopping 700,000. Last month, it averaged out at 468,000. And everyone said, oh, we've bottomed out. We're scraping along the bottom. We're not going down any further. But the average unemployment additions to the queue are 700,000 people a month. The number of Americans who've stopped paying their healthcare premiums because they can't afford it. 36% of Americans have stopped paying healthcare. And in Detroit City, things are so grim that men are committing crime. They don't want to be homeless and they don't want to be hungry, so let's commit an offence so we get a bed and we get 3 square meals a day. Now, the people who used to serve at soup kitchens are now lining up at soup kitchens. This is the land of opportunity. This is America, the land of the free, the land of the stars, the land of invention. And all the people who've lost their homes, the 8,000 a month that I've given you a figure, where do they go? They go into tent cities. They're springing up all over the United States, predominantly in California. Here you see San Diego in the streets, tents just pitched in the streets. This is tragic. I like the Americans. You know, they're smart people, they're inventive people, they're entrepreneurial people. They have fought shoulder to shoulder with us during some of our worst conflicts. I like the Americans. I feel very sorry for them. My heart goes out to them. The number of people on food stamps in America is 1 in 10. They don't show you this in the soap operas coming out of America. It's all glitz and glamour. But this is the reality. This is real America. And I'm hurting for them. Are you? Do you feel for them? Yes. This is dreadful. Statue of Liberty. How can this happen to the United States? A great nation, brought to its knees. Well, quickly, I've given you the problem. We don't want to hear more of the problem. What caused it? There was a housing boom. It was going on for years and years. Houses going up everywhere. This is good for the financiers in Wall Street. The more loans that were written, the more commission they got, the more bonuses they got, the more brokers got involved. And so everyone was on the gravy train to keep the housing boom booming. And then it's sort of slowed because there's only so many housing loans that you can hand out to people who qualify. So the people in Wall Street thought, well, we don't want it to slow because if it slows, we don't get our bonuses and then we don't get our commissions. And it affects our lifestyle. So let's think of a product that will keep the housing boom booming. So they came up with a subprime mortgage loan. A subprime mortgage loan is, I want to give you a loan, and you say, well, Herb, I'm no good. I don't have a job. That's okay. And I don't have an income. Well, that's okay too. And I don't have any assets. Well, that's okay too. Doesn't matter, you qualify, sign here. The interest rate is a very small rate, so just sign up. Now, here you see that subprime mortgages occupied a very small percentage of the mortgage market. That's the percentage. In 94 to 97, it occupied about 3% of the mortgage market. You see that? Look what happened. By 2004, it skyrocketed to 20, and by 2009, it's over 30%. More than a third of the mortgage market is made up of people who borrowed who can't afford to repay. Because they're stupid? No. No. They were vulnerable. And the financiers wanted to keep the boom booming and said, just sign here because the interest rate is so low, and you'll be right, it's cheaper than renting. Were there any warning signs? Or did it just happen out of the blue? There must have been some warning signs. Well, we know that in 1985 there was a savings and loan scandal. Remember that in the United States, for those of you older than I am? Remember 1985, the SNL scandal? Or do you remember the 1987 Black October share market crash? It happened overnight and everyone panicked here in Australia. I was a kid at the time. Then there was the Mexican financial crisis in 1994. Now, by now you would have thought alarm bells are ringing. We need regulation, we need controls, we need responsibility to prevent this happening on a recurring basis. In 1997 there was the Asian financial crisis. Remember that one? Good. I'm glad that someone remembers these things. Remember the 1999 technology shares crisis, .com. I remember that one. And that went on till 2001. Now, by now, you would have thought someone was going to alert the authorities, hey guys, this is not good, this is going to blow up in our faces one day, but no one did. And of course, 20% of subprime of the mortgage market was taken up by subprimes by 2004. The warning signs were there, and these two gentlemen, that you probably wouldn't invite them to a dinner party because their personalities are fairly dull, I would imagine, but they are multi-billionaires, these guys. You've heard of Warren Buffett and you've heard of George Soros. Highly successful business people, highly successful investors, very conservative, very wise. They raised the alarm bells for years and no one listened. They would attend Warren Buffett's seminars to hear what the great man had to say because they knew he was good. But when he raised the alarm bells, they did not want to hear because he was interfering with their ability to earn huge incomes. So they kept the boom going. So the whole subprime mentality was priming the world for disaster. So if you didn't have a job, no income and no job and no assets, you qualify for a ninja loan. That's what they were called because it was only 1.25%. But of course the fine print is that the rate was variable. But nobody cared. Let's sign them up. Let's write up the mortgage. Let's get the bonuses and the establishment fees and the commission and the brokerage. And if they can't pay when the interest rate moves up, I don't care. That was the culture. That was the culture. So the smaller banks sent out armies of brokers and sales representatives selling ninja loans. Why didn't they take any notice of the fact that they didn't have an income? Because any responsible bank would have said, your credit is no good, you don't have an income, you can't pay the mortgage. Sorry, loan declined. Under normal occasions, that's what would have happened, yes? But under this mentality, these banks who wrote up the mortgages, the ninja loans, had no intention of hanging on to the mortgage. We'll write the paper, we'll get the fees for ourselves, and we'll sell the mortgage to somebody else. And it's their problem. You with me? They're selling the mortgages. So it went from the smaller banks to the Fannie Maes and the Freddie Macs. And this is what happened. I'm a small bank. I've written up some mortgages, some subprime mortgages. That's what they look like. They're toxic. They're toxic. People who haven't got a job or an income or any assets. I know they're high risk, and so Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are not going to buy it, so I need to wrap that into a bundle of securities that are more sound, so I can sell that as a package of bundled securities to the bigger banks, the bigger institutions. So I sell it like this. And I get my $100 million for all the mortgages, and I'm out of it. If all those loans go bad, I don't care. It's their problem now. I've got my 100 million, and I'm going to go out and sell more ninja loans. So what does Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac do? They take what they've bought from the smaller banks and put it in with other securities that are perfectly sound and perfectly commercial, and they sell that to unsuspecting banks who want a slice of the American housing boom. It's a new form of credit chemistry, where toxic was mixed in with genuine, where rubbish was mixed in with good stuff and disguised. It was sliced and diced into a package that could be sold because the risk was disguised. Do you follow me? Do you follow me? No one's going to buy rubbishy mortgages. No bank's going to buy a whole stack of mortgages that have been written and given to people without an income. So they had to be disguised, concealed. There's deception involved. It is criminal conduct, am I right? Yes. It is what's called obtaining a financial advantage by deception. It's criminality. And in our 4 o'clock meeting, I said, is it professional? And someone answered, yes, it's totally professional. But it's totally unethical, isn't it? And so unsuspecting banks all over the world, Deutsche Bank, HSBC, BNP Paribas, Barclays, and Ing, the Dutch bank, and so on. Thousands of banks all over the world bought into the American housing boom by buying mortgages from sellers with a ticking time bomb inside. Commonwealth Bank bought some, the NAB, the ANZ and Westpac. They were not immune. And no one quite knew the extent of how much of this rubbish was on their books. Because how do you quantify it when you've bought millions of dollars worth of mortgages? How do you say, well, this one's risky and that one's not risky? They're all mixed in together. You bought it as a package. But the sorry result on the street is this. While Wall Street grabbed for the greedy dollar, Main Street bled financially to death in the gutter. And the tough guys of America who were in this position just put their house keys in the letterbox and walked out. But the more emotional ones stayed and waited for the sheriff to turn up until the door was battered down. Dreadful. Here is the foreclosure rate to the first quarter of this year, and you can see there that in 1 quarter, just 3 months, 803,489 homes were repossessed. That's almost 9,000 homes a day. Every one of those is a family. Every one of those has children, perhaps. Every one of those is a marriage that could be on the rocks because of it. No one cared. Vulnerable minorities, Hispanics, unemployed, and all the rest were roped into this tsunami of greed. And of course, with all these houses coming on the market, the house prices plummeted. Do you see that? It's a free fall from the first quarter of 2006. So much stock on the market, too many houses on the market, the values drop. Makes it more difficult to sell, makes it more difficult for the banks to get their money back, And so the problem feeds on itself. It's like a caterpillar eating its head off, inside out, back to front. It was feeding on its own problem. So how did all that translate into the share market? What's the share market got to do with subprime mortgages? Because the banks that I've shown you who bought these toxic time bombs could no longer borrow from each other. The Commonwealth Bank wants to borrow $100 million from Deutsche Bank. They've been doing it for 20 years. Just make a phone call and it's done over the phone. This time the answer is no. Sorry, Commonwealth Bank. We're not so sure about you because we don't know how many toxic loans you've got on your books. So the banks, who had been lending to each other for decades, suddenly stopped lending to each other, suspicious of the extent of the toxic waste on the books. And so the banks didn't have the money to lend. And so companies like Chrysler, who had always been able to roll over their credit facility with the bank, were now told, sorry, Chrysler, loan declined. We need to call up the loan. It's a credit facility. Its maturity date is next month. You've got to pay it back. And away it went. Men's hearts, failing them for fear, for the expectation of the things that are coming on the world. Men's hearts, failing them for fear. Panic. My forefathers rode around in a horse and buggy. They had no stress at all. They didn't have mobile phones and computers and gadgets. I've got the mobile phone and the gadgets, but I've got the stress. We live in an age of anxiety and distress, and men's hearts are failing them for fear. You only need to get on CityLink to see how people drive. It's a city gone mad. People are uptight. People are in a hurry. People are anxious. Have a look at the human behaviour here, and I want you to lock this in your memory, because we're going to unpack this over the next few weeks. The same human behaviour of lawlessness, the same human behaviour of warning, ignoring the warning signs, the same human behaviour of mixing toxic assets in with genuine, the same human behaviour of oppressing the minority. Those same human behaviours will be repeated in the global financial crisis that the Bible predicts. I want you to just look at that screen for a moment. Lawlessness, disregard for law, ignoring the warning signs, ignoring the signs that are screaming out all around us, mixing in rubbishy beliefs with genuine beliefs. I'm now switching to the world of religion, you may have noticed. And oppressing the minority, the big and the powerful oppressing the minority. Lock that in your mind. We're going to unpack this progressively as we go. Have a guess what the executive pay in Wall Street was in 1970. It was 35 times what the average American worker received. You might say, oh, that's a lot. Yeah? We come to 2007. And the average CEO in Wall Street was earning 344 times the average wage. That's 40 years later. That's extraordinary, isn't it? But it gets worse. The top hedge fund managers in America, the top 50 hedge funds, these are the ones who deal in credit risk, received each in 1 year, $588 million. That's 19,000 times as much as the average wage. In 2007, the top 5 Wall Street investment banks paid their executives bonuses of $39 billion. And when they had paid them their bonuses, they put their hand up and said, we want bailout money, please. And the government gave them bailout money financed by the American taxpayer. greed, arrogance, corruption. Why arrogance? Because when they got the bailout money, President Obama said, "Can you tell us what you've done with the bailout money that we've given you?" No. No. Don't want to. Don't want to tell you. We don't have any legal obligation to tell you. Arrogance. Feathering their own nests. Driving around in their Ferraris and Porsche and their multiple mansions and their silk suits and their gold cufflinks and all the rubbish that goes with it. I've met some of these characters in Collins Street, and they're not the nicest people in the world. They're up themselves. They've got no compassion. If an old lady tripped over in Collins Street, they would probably step straight over her. There's not a lot of heart in Collins Street, in the financial markets. The only scriptural verse that even mentions a global financial crisis, there's only one. I won't be dishonest with you and try and twist the scriptures and make something out of something that isn't there. There's only one scriptural verse that talks about a global financial crisis, and that's found in the book of Revelation. And let's turn to it now. It's a brand new Bible. The gold leaf will probably stick together as you turn the pages, but let's move quickly. We have half an hour. I'll try and go as fast as I can. But you've come tonight to hear what the Bible has to say. Page 1668. The book of Revelation, chapter 13. The only specific mention of a global financial crisis. Verse 16. Have you got page 1668? You with me? Is the gold sticking together? Yes. Well, it's a brand new Bible. Verse 16, he causes all, that's global, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, that's global, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. That's it. It's the only reference in Scripture to a global crisis. And if you're self-employed, if you're running a business, maybe you're a builder or a truck driver, you work for yourself. The Bible says in the last days before Jesus returns, the final crisis, the last hurrah, the last problematic issue for planet Earth, hasn't happened yet, it's future, is if you want to work for yourself and you want to keep trading and you want to keep buying and you want to keep selling, according to this verse, you're going to need something. You're going to need the mark of the beast. You say, Herb, I don't like the sound of that. Mark of the beast, I thought the mark of the beast is a bad thing. Yes, it is. God condemns the mark of the beast in the strongest language. But if you want to keep trading, under those circumstances, at that time in history and its future, and I believe it's not that far off, you're going to need the mark of the beast. But if you say, well, I don't want the mark of the beast, then you cannot buy or sell. Now that is a global financial crisis, if ever there was one, yes? We won't discuss it tonight. You need, please, to attend this presentation, Mark of the Beast, on Saturday the 22nd of August or Sunday the 23rd, where I will unpack this. But to get to this conclusion, to make it crystal clear, so that there is no prevarication, so that you don't say, oh, I didn't quite understand that, or that's all a bit far-fetched, and that's just his opinion, so that we get a crystal clear result here. You really need to come with me, please, to all the meetings next week, the week after that. We need to travel through 4 more meetings after this one. I will unpack it logically. I won't manipulate your mind. I won't play with it. I'll treat the scriptures with utmost respect. But we will get to what is this mark of the beast? A lot of weird opinions out there. But to get to a clean result, please attend the meetings. And if you're into football or you've got something else on, cancel it. I've given you 3 different sessions to come to. Take your pick. Cancel it. And by the end of it, you'll be standing outside saying, Herb, I'm so glad I came to the meetings. I was full of doubt and scepticism and I was suspicious of you, but now that I've heard it, I am so relieved to hear what it's really all about. Okay? I'll be here. Will you be here? Okay? So, the interesting thing about the mark of the beast is that the behaviourisms that we've covered in the global financial crisis were also there, will also be there in the mark of the beast. The experts, the religious experts, I'm now talking about the mark of the beast, I'm giving you a little preview of what to expect. The religious experts will ignore all the warning signs, just like the experts of Wall Street. The religious experts will mix in toxic beliefs with genuine beliefs, making it very hard to know whether you're being deceived, because it's a mixture. Okay? The religious leaders, under the circumstances of the mark of the beast, the big and powerful ones will oppress the minority, just like Wall Street did. And they will exercise lawlessness. I'm talking God's law, not civil law. That's a preview of what's to come. And it's found in the book of Revelation, the only reference in Scripture to the mark of the beast. But you need, please, to come to this one. Why? Because this one will give you confidence in the Scriptures, that the Scriptures are accurate, that when the Scriptures say something, it means it and it happens. I'll prove it to you. And you need to come to this one because it revolves around the 10 Commandments. Do they apply for Christians today? Or are they irrelevant and were they abolished at the cross of Christ? What is this amnesia epidemic, which is forgetfulness? What is history's huge hoax? All these tie in to this one, the mark of the beast. If you say, well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time, Herb, I'll come for the mark of the beast, but you won't get me to this one, and you won't get me to this one, and I might come to that one, but on this one, you'll be confused. Or you may not be confused, but you'll want to argue with me and say, well, you know, I don't agree with your interpretation, Herb. That's because you didn't hear this. Okay? I want to see you week after week, and you will be shaking my hand outside saying it's the best thing I've heard in years. I've never heard it explained so clearly, okay? Let's turn to another scriptural verse that talks about money. Page 1633. The book of James. And as we read this, I would like you to think about what we've said about Wall Street. 1633, James chapter 5, verse 1 to 7. Are you marking them with your red pencils? Good. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure when? When? In the last days. Is it talking about their last days in the New Testament or our last days in 2009? Let's read on. Indeed, the wages of the labourers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out. Here is oppression of minority groups by the rich and powerful, who are now weeping because they're not getting their $70 million a year anymore. It's been cut down to $30 million a year. How am I going to live on that? And they've trodden and stood on the shoulders of the poor. Verse 5, you've lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury, and you've fattened your hearts as in a day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the just. He doesn't resist you. Therefore be patient, brethren, until when? The coming of the Lord. The last days, the coming of the Lord, the return of Jesus Christ. This is the context. Do you see that? Do you see that? It's not talking about the last days of James when he wrote this epistle. It's talking about those last days just before Jesus returns. The rich will be weeping because their riches have been corroded. They've lost income, standing on the shoulders of the worker. There it is in black and white. An amazing prophecy. Wall Street arrogance. There it is again. Sign of the times in which we live. Now you might say, what about the Great Depression? Did you live through that? If you did, you'd be over 90. My mother lived through it. And she told me all the horror stories. Did you know in the Great Depression, the unemployment rate was a whopping 20 to 40%? It's only 9.5 at the moment. Things were far worse in the Great Depression. World trade had completely collapsed. Democracies had completely collapsed. Did the Bible predict that? No, it didn't. What about World War I? That engulfed the world. Did the Bible predict that? No, it didn't. World War II? No, it didn't. There are general references to wars, but there's no prediction in Scripture for major events like this. If there was, the Bible would stretch to the moon and back. If the Bible were to record every time mankind does something stupid, the Bible would stretch to the moon and back. So the Bible is only concerned with how major events affect God's people. If you're a believer, if you believe in Christ and you want to follow him, Bible prophecy is predominantly concerned how world events will affect you because of your faith. Not all Bible prophecy, but most of it. Let's turn to another verse, 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, page 1609. Now, when you read this, you buy the Herald Sun tomorrow, okay? And you compare what you read in the Herald Sun tomorrow to what I'm reading to you now. Know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. Men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud and blasphemers. And that type of character is usually disobedient to their parents. Am I right? Unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, no self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Having a type of godliness, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. From such people turn away. Now you pick up the Herald Sun tomorrow and you see, prove me wrong. That's the character of Melbourne society today. And it's every day in the press, every day. There's not a day that goes past where you don't pick up the media and you don't see this character coming through. But my friends will say, well, you know, Herb, you're getting a bit carried away. People have always been like this. You know what? You're right, they have. In the days of Noah, they were like that. In the days of Lot, they were like that. Before the Babylonian captivity, they were like that. In the times of Jesus, they were like that. So what's changed? Come with me, please, to Luke chapter 21, page 1423. This is Jesus talking. Whenever you see red print in the New Testament, that's the words of Jesus Christ. Verse 25 of chapter 21. And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, in the stars, and on the earth. What? Distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and the expectation of those things that are coming on the earth, for the powers of the heaven will be shaken. Did you know the word shaken comes from the word earthquake? And I did a study in Greek, in the Greek language on this, in which the New Testament was written, and this is talking about Tsunamis. Read it again. Verse 25, last section. The sea and the waves roaring. Why? Because the powers of the heavens were shaken. Sea and waves roaring because of earthquakes is a tsunami, yes? And on top of that, you have a tsunami of human fear. People's hearts failing them for fear. This is the picture Jesus says will typify our society just before he comes. Because he says in verse 27, then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of glory. There's our men's hearts failing them for fear. There's all the rubbish happening in our world. I was talking to a 15-year-old a few weeks ago and he said, Herb, I don't know any different. What's so different about this? I was born into this. That to me is normal. Epidemics, swine flu, military, weird and wild weather, floods and earthquakes. And he said to me, you know, that's normal. And I never thought about it, that teenagers today think this is normal. I can assure you it's not. And Jesus sort of paints a picture in all his sermons about the end times that this is what will characterise it. But he puts his finger, Jesus, on false prophets as the predominant sign. This fellow thinks he's Jesus Christ. False prophets, false religion. Many will come in my name saying I'm Christ. On top of all this other stuff that we've looked at. These are general signs. You can't say they're specific. They're not specific enough. They're too broad. And you know what? Jesus agrees with you. Come with me to Matthew 24, page 1339. If anyone says to you, oh, these things have always happened, you know, why should I be concerned? We've always had earthquakes, we've always had military action, we've always had disease, and we've always had financial hassles. Nothing's changed, it's always been like this. You know something? Jesus agrees with him. Because he says in verse 6 of Matthew 24, and you will hear of wars and rumours of wars. See that you're not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So he agrees with you. He agrees with the scoffers out there who say, well, nothing's changed. Come with me to this verse, 2 Peter chapter 3, page 1643. I love to show this to people who make fun of Jesus' signs of the end. When they make fun of it, I say, did you know the Bible predicted that you would say that? And they say, where? Show me. And we're looking at it right now, please. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 3. Knowing this first, have you got it? 2 Peter chapter 3, 1643 is the page number. The Bible says, know this first, that scoffers, that's hecklers and jeerers, scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their lusts and saying, where's the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continued just as they were from creation. Nothing's changed. Bible predicted it. Now the signs of the times can be cut up into three categories. There's environmental stuff, climate change driven. There is wars and commotions, and there are false religions and religious tensions. All of Jesus' pronouncements about the end times fall into these three categories. But the one that he stressed more than the others was this one. He repeatedly said, be careful that no one deceives you. Even the very elect will be deceived unless you're careful. Many false prophets will spring up like mushrooms. So the earthquakes and the wars, yes, granted, we've always had them. But this epidemic of weird religions popping up all over the place. The Christian faith is now a minority faith in Australia, did you know that? It's no longer a Christian country. 50 years ago it was. And in the notes that you're going to receive in the mail, I will give you all the Bible verses where Jesus specifically puts his finger on environmental signs that are climate change driven, wars and commotions, and the false religion and the false prophets and so on. You will get all those references in the notes if you've addressed your envelope. You'll get them on Wednesday. If you haven't done it, now's a good time to do it. You know, Al Gore was in Melbourne on Monday. He had a breakfast seminar at the Docklands. You know what he said? He must be a student of the Bible. He said, you cannot ignore the fact that the cyclones are getting bigger and the fires are getting stronger and the sea levels are rising and the refugees are moving from places that they've long called home. You can't ignore the fact that all this stuff is on the increase. Yes, we've always had them. Yes, they've always been part of human behaviour and history, but they're increasing at an exponential rate. 1 Thessalonians, I've said it right. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 1 to 3. You got it? For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, like my CFA captain, then sudden destruction comes upon them. As what? Finish it for me. Now, I have never been a pregnant woman, but pregnant women have told me that there are 3 stages in the contraction process. Stage 1, which is early, stage 2, which is active, and then stage 3, which is the transition stage. And tell me if I'm right, ladies, but as you get closer to the birth, the contractions get more intense and closer together, yes? The Bible is saying that all these signs that we've looked at, that have been with humankind for centuries, will get more intense and more frequent as we get closer to the arrival of Jesus Christ. Now, you can choose to believe it, or you can say, I don't believe it. And be like me and sit in your house and ignore what the warning signs are telling me about the bushfires and just get wiped out because I've ignored the signs. God sends this stuff to us to wake us up. But there's so much of it happening now that we've almost reached the point where we think it's normal. It is not normal. It is 100% abnormal. And a God of love is trying to bring indifferent Australians to a point of faith. There is no hope in Kevin Rudd. There is no hope in President Obama. There is no hope in the media and the glossy magazines. Our only hope is God. Now, the disciples came to Jesus and said, what is the sign? They didn't say, give us a whole list of signs, write them up on the board. Give us 24 signs, Lord, about your soon return. They asked for only one sign, didn't they? Have a look at the verse, page 1338. And they said, what is the sign? Just one. Just give me one sign of your soon coming. Read it, please. Turn to page 1338. Matthew 24, verse 3. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, Lord, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world? One sign. And you know, Jesus sort of said, well, okay, I'll just paint you a picture of world conditions, wars and earthquakes and famines and this and that, pestilences. But then Jesus answered the question. And he said, the sign of my soon return is when the gospel goes to all the world. Turn with me to verse 14 on the same page. And this gospel, verse 14, of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations. Back to our friend with the pens, which we now know are computers. The gospel can go to all the world with technology like this. A missionary need only go to Kenya with 5 pens in his shirt pocket and sit in a grass hut and surf the internet and show the message of Jesus to Africans. We never had iPods. We never had satellites. We never had internet. We never had laptops. We never had technology that can take this message that I'm preaching to you tonight, which is being filmed, by satellite to all the world. Now, people thought the world was going to end when Adolf Hitler was running around Europe. It was a terrible time, according to my parents. They were there. And they thought this is going to be the end of the world. He's the Antichrist. But in Adolf Hitler's time, we didn't have this sort of technology. The gospel couldn't go to all the world quickly without this. So every time there is a technology leap with software or with hardware, think about what Jesus said is the sign of his soon return. That's what will send his message with lightning speed around the world. When Wall Street went down, everyone around the world knew about it within 30 minutes. Bad news travels fast. Lies travel around the world with lightning speed while truth is still putting on its running shoes. It's hard to get truth out fast, but bad news travels quickly, and technology that delivered the bad news of Wall Street will deliver the good news of the gospel. Amen.
If this program has gripped your interest and you want the lecture notes, just email hkea@hkea.org.au and you will receive a fast email reply with the notes in PDF format. Thank you for watching this presentation.